everybody. Good afternoon, and welcome to the Vancouver Writers Fest. My name is Leslie Hertig, and I'm the artistic director here at the festival. We've had a small technical glitch. We were about to show you a beautiful video from Rebecca Duncan of the Squamish Nation, but unfortunately, we are having trouble getting it up onto our screen. And so instead, I will let you know that the Vancouver Writers Fest carries out its work in this event today on the unceded and ancestral territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples, and we are very grateful to be here. This event today, I Didn't Do What You Told Me, is one of 4 events that was specially curated by our guest curator, Ivan Coyote. It's featuring A.S. King, Sybil Lamb, and David A. Robertson in conversation with Tanya Boteju. And we're very excited to have all of you here. Tanya has graced our stages in this past year with her debut YA novel, Kings, Queens, and In-Betweens, a book that garnered praise across North America and cheers far and wide. She's an English teacher. I believe her class might even be joining us today here in Vancouver, and a great friend of the festivals. We're very pleased to welcome Tanya Boteju.
Hi, thanks so much, Leslie. I'm so happy to be here. This festival is one of my favorite events in the city, and so I'm really honored to be here as moderator and thankful to Ivan Coyote for inviting me. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. I'm also really grateful to be here on the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. And I also want to shout out all of the students who are in the audience, as well as their incredible teachers. And of course, my grade 11 class, who is just down the hallway listening in because I am forcing them to. These 3 writers are incredible. I have so enjoyed reading their books, and I think we're going to have a really lively, wonderful discussion. Just so you know a little bit about the format for today, I'm going to invite each writer one at a time to speak for a few minutes about their books. I know that some people in the audience may not have had a chance to read them yet, but I really encourage you, once we're done today, to go out and grab your copies because you won't be disappointed. And then we will spend a little bit of time chatting, and then we'll open it up to questions from the audience. So audience, please, if you do have questions, you can type them in the chat on YouTube and they'll get funneled through to me, and I will do my best to get in as many of them as possible in this short time we have together. I'm going to start with David A. Robertson, and here is a little bit about him. David Robertson is the author of numerous books for young readers, including When We Were Alone, which won the 2017 Governor General's Literary Award and was nominated for the TD Canadian Children's Literature Award. A sought-after speaker and educator, David is a member of the Norway House Cree Nation and currently lives in Winnipeg. His latest books are a middle-grade fantasy novel, The Barren Grounds by Tundra Books, and the memoir Black Water, HarperCollins Canada. Through his writings about Canada's Indigenous peoples, Robertson educates as well as entertains, reflecting Indigenous cultures, histories, and communities while illuminating many contemporary issues. Please, David, take on over.
Thank you, Tanya. Hi, everybody. My name is David Robertson. I have bedhead, and it is great to see you. Well, I wish I could see you. It's great to be here. I'm the author of The Barren Grounds, which is this book right here. And I'm just going to tell you quickly about it and then read you a little excerpt from it. The Barren Grounds is about 2 foster children who are Cree, who are living in the foster care system. And one day they discover a way to open a portal into another reality. And that reality is leads into a world called Aski, which is Cree for the world or Earth. And while on that world, they find the inhabitants, who are animal beings, are thrust into an eternal winter. And the Cree children, Morgan and Eli, go on this adventure to try and bring back the summer to the northern country in order to save the world and the village called Misawa. which is a Cree word also that means all that is, above the ground and below the sky. And so it's an adventure story, but it's also a journey towards identity and cultural reconnection. And the excerpt that I want to read to you is Morgan and Eli have two foster parents who are very well-intentioned and very misinformed about the ways that they need to support the foster children, Morgan and Eli, in the foster home, in an attempt to help them connect with their Cree identities. And so in this excerpt, Katie and James have decided to give Morgan a present that they felt would help them feel more connected to their culture. So, well, Katie exchanged a look with James, who nodded at her. We wanted to do something because you've been here for 2 months now. 2 months today, James added, as though Morgan needed the math explained. But maybe she did. She hadn't kept track of when she'd arrived, and certainly would never have kept track to celebrate the date. So we're celebrating. Morgan tried to swallow the burning in her chest. Our anniversary. Like we're dating, Morgan continued in her head. That's right, Katie said. Not in a weird way, James said. Oh, it was weird, but Morgan also kept this to herself. Why 2 months? Why not 1 month? It just felt like maybe you needed something nice done for you today, Katie said. So this is because of the food face, Morgan said. I would have been fine if you didn't make my food into a happy face, right? That was just a coincidence, James said, obviously trying to avoid another blow up. Are you fine though, Katie asked. This question hung in the air until Katie placed a box on the table beside the cake. It had black wrapping paper with 2 ribbons, one red and one yellow, which met at the top of the package under a pretty white bow. They were the same colors as the medicine wheel Morgan had seen at school. Morgan took a deep breath. Remain calm. So what? They're celebrating your 2-month anniversary with them. It's cringeworthy, but there are worse things in the world. Climate change, for example, that's worse. Katie and James looked hopeful. Eli looked scared. Katie slid the gift closer towards Morgan. Open it. Okay, Morgan said, sure. Morgan pulled off the bow, slid off the ribbons, and ripped open the wrapping paper to reveal a shoebox. The box read Manitoba Mucklucks. She lifted the lid and saw a brand new pair of moccasins. They were mostly black with black leather and black fur around the opening and a dark shade of gray over the top with some intricate white beadwork. Morgan closed her eyes and focused on her breathing. Do you like them? Katie asked. Morgan kept her eyes closed as long as she could. Morgan, James said. Morgan shook her head quickly. She needed a minute. Just accept them, she thought to herself, and put them on your stupid feet. Let it go. Katie said, we thought you could just wear them around the house. I know the hardwood down here gets cold in the morning, so it would be comfortable. And in the winter, you can actually wear them outside instead of boots, James said. They're called wool teepee. Wool teepee, Morgan repeated, still breathing. We wanted to make you feel more at home, Katie said. Morgan slammed a flat palm against the table. Okay. She opened her eyes. Katie and James looked stunned, frozen, eyes wide. Eli looked like a balloon that had air seeping out of it. Let me get this straight, she said, trying to lower her voice. You thought that giving me something cultural as a totally lame 2-month anniversary celebration from a place where I was taken from would make me feel more at home here. We don't want you to feel disconnected from your culture, that's all, James said. I don't even know my culture. Morgan put both hands against her chest and she could feel her heart pounding. I've literally been away from my home since I was a toddler. Being a kid with no real home, with no real parents, accepting the fact that there probably won't be a 3 or 4 month anniversary with a cake and moccasins, that's my culture. No, it's not, Eli said. Who you are is still inside you. Shut up, Eli. You're not helping. He's right, though, James said. We thought some of this might help you reconnect with. We've read that, Katie interrupted. As foster parents, we should try to expose you to your culture. She looked about ready to burst into tears. We don't want to make the same mistakes that have been made in the past. Well, unless you can like go into the quantum realm back in time and stop my mom from getting rid of me, Morgan stopped. She placed both palms flat on the table to keep herself steady. Everything's a mistake. Your mom didn't get rid of you, Katie said. Did she tell you that? Morgan asked through clenched teeth. What are you guys, Facebook friends? No, no mother would. You're not a mother, so how would you know? Morgan stood up. She glanced from Katie to James to Eli. Maybe you should read one of my books instead of whatever you've been reading, because trying to fix things, trying to fix me really is a fantasy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, David. I can't wait to talk a little bit more about Morgan. I love that kid. Next up, I'm going to introduce to you Sybil Lamb, who is the author of the illustrated YA novel, The Girl Who Was Convinced Beyond All Reason That She Could Fly, published by Vancouver's own incredible Arsenal Pulp Press. Her writing and art have appeared in books, magazines, comics, and alleys and tattoos. Her novel, I've Got a Time Bomb, was published by Topside Press. Her underground comic, The Lost Little Girl Show, 19999, has been a hit with subterranean bunker dwellers since the era of live journal. Casey Plett called The Girl Who Could Fly a beautiful dream of a book, whose main character, Eggs, is the most lovable, winning character she's met in a long time. Please welcome to the virtual stage, Sybil Lamb.
Hello, everyone on the media, on Zoom and YouTube. Gosh, I prepared so hard for the Vancouver Writes Fest. I went and like eavesdropped on everybody else's webinars and did all that. Well, the girl who was convinced beyond all reason that she could fly. I didn't plan my bit at all for this. You know, they keep saying that's about this like all the people who talk about books keep saying like it's a story of this unlikely homeless girl and her friends taking care of her, and like Eggs, like, you know, at the beginning I never even thought of that. I never even thought of calling her the homeless girl. She's just the girl who can fly and thus doesn't need to live anywhere. So it usurps that, but that's a whole other thing we could talk about. What's really important is that I've just always in the back of my head been like, why haven't I drawn a big illustrated kids book on the scope of like Shel Silverstein's Where the Sidewalk Ends, but mixed with Daniel Pinkwater's The Snark Out Boys and the Avocado of Death. And now I have. So what's important is let's dive right into the middle of this, or in the beginning of the middle, and I will now read from chapter 4, where it's discovered that the ground is made of hot lava. Eggs seemed to live nowhere. If anyone asked, Eggs usually claimed that she lived in the bird feeder at the tiny park near the old mushroom and root vegetable market. Everyone knew that couldn't be true because no one wanted to call her on it, though. Grack would start peddling his hot dog cart around at dawn, selling his bacon, sausage, and hash brown bun dogs to catch people on their way to work. Eggs would appear before any of the half-awake shopkeepers had even gone for coffee, so nobody noticed her groggily hanging off of street lamps, looking much more like a bat than a bird. One time, a woman buying a party-sized bag of fish stick hot dogs told Grack that she had been getting her braces tightened at an orthodontist up on the 6th floor of the tallest building at the edge of the market, and maybe it had been the Novocaine. But she thought she'd seen the flying girl sleeping between the air conditioners on the roof of the wholesale coffee mug warehouse. Grack was pretty sure that Eggs was living behind the sign of the old apartment store full of milk crates of stereo cables. It was this giant old metal sign that said department store in big red neon letters that didn't work, and had 992 burnt out light bulbs and 8 flickering ones that worked. It had wires and pigeons all over it. He wondered if Eggs got along with birds and how they negotiated who got to nest where. The truth was, sometimes Egg fell asleep, balanced on top of a foam pole in sight of Grack's hot dog cart. She tried sleeping in trees at the amusement park a bunch of times, but the security guys with the giant butterfly net were increasingly on her case every week. She definitely didn't want to stay at the $5 Punk Hotel, even in the discount room on the roof. The whole place was just punks trying to talk loud and talk the loudest and break things 247. Oh, sure, they ate lots of hot dogs. And they were mostly chill and funny, but any random misinterpreted comment could lead to dozens of punk boys and girls stomping in circles, breaking TVs while screaming made-up songs, and then they'd set a chair on fire. Iggs thought it was a nice place to visit, but an impossible place to sleep. Grack was getting frustrated that they only hung out while he was working, even if he did kind of work from dawn to dusk with no days off. He wanted to just hang out for real. So one day he tried to tempt Iggs back to his apartment with the promise of a whole box of melt-proof ice cream sandwiches that he'd gotten by mistake and therefore needed help eating. Iggs followed Grack home, bouncing along the street lamps and no parking signs until Grack rode his bicycle hot dog into an old boxy stone building. Opened the door and it looked at least 100 years old from a time they would have parked horse-drawn stuff in there. But instead of horse-drawn carriages and wagons inside, there were rows of food carts, both motorized and pedal-powered. They ranged in size from like a little tricycle with 2 buckets for ice cream to a bell and whistle-covered school bus, Wienermobile, school bus-sized Wienermobile, with all the stainless steel mobile kitchen grill and warehouse-sized room. The warehouse-sized room, it even had 4 separate walk-in coolers, holding enough meat, veggies, buns, and fixins to feed an entire full baseball stadium for a month. Iggs flutter-wriggled under the stone arch of the big door and then fluttered regularly across the metal beams of the ceiling. She was surprised and impressed. Wow. Hot dog bicycles must sure make a lot of money, she said, kind of like a half question. Grack beamed proudly. Yes, they do, he said, and then he grinned at her and did his cool eyebrow thing. The carts and trucks and stuff weren't all specifically his. I mean, the building and everything in it was a family business. Aunts, uncles, grandparents, great-grandparents, the brothers and sisters and all that. More family than he can count lived in this building, and everyone had their own hot dog cart. Grack turned to Iggs, who was dangling from a support beam. He took off his glasses and looked at her in the eye and said, I am Grackle McCart, and you are standing in the McCart family hot dog empire, built by over 100 years of hot dog sales. My great-grandfather, Elijah Snipe McCart, is the original inventor of the hot dog cart. I am the youngest heir to the McCart empire, and I'm inviting you into it. What are you talking about? Iggs said. She was confused about what the heck was going on and felt afraid and confused from all this being indoors. She tried to jump out the window to clear her head, but embarrassingly she mistook a clean window for an open one and slammed into it face first. Stunned floor. Welcome to Earth, said Grack. It was the first time he'd ever actually seen her land. And then, yeah, and that is the girl who could think she could fly, chapter 4, the first half of it.
It was a wonderful reading, Sybil. You're
you.
an expert reader. Thank you. Next up, I'm going to introduce A.S. King, who is the award-winning author of many acclaimed books for young readers. Her novel, Dig, won the 2020 Michael L. Prince Award. If you don't know, that's a really big deal. And Ask the Passengers won the 2013 Los Angeles Times Book Prize. She is a faculty member of the Writing for Children and Young Adults MFA program at Vermont College of Fine Arts and spends many months of the year traveling the country speaking to high school and university students, educators, and humans who care about the mental health of young people. The New York Times called her one of the best YA writers working today. King lives with her family in Pennsylvania, where she returned after living on a farm and teaching adult literacy in Ireland for more than a decade. Welcome to the stage, Amy.
Thank you, Tanya. It's so nice to be here. Thanks a million for having me. I have dreams of moving to Canada, but my Irish husband's like, no, it's too cold. I'm like, but you're from Ireland. Anyway, more on that later. So I want to talk to you a bit about my book, Dig, and I want to read a little bit from it. This book is about, has kind of 9 points of view. So it's about a family. So it covers, it starts with grandparents, Marla and Gottfried Hemmings, who are in their 70s. And I'm not going to read you that chapter because, I don't know, it just doesn't seem right. Today I'm going to curse a little bit. I hope that's okay with you. Anyway, but it starts with this character, and his name is the shoveler. And the shoveler is shoveling snow. And it's about to be a blizzard, and he'd woken up that morning before the blizzard came in. These are the things you need to know. He'd woken up that morning to a telephone call that came in at 5:33 in the morning, and the guy talked to him, and he tried to remember the guy's name, but he couldn't. And he just knows it was Somethingson, right? Like Stevenson or Johnson or Robinson or something like that. And the other thing you need to know is that the neighbor's name is Mike, but that's all you need to know for now. But the book itself explores what racism on a more normalized level. In fact, the normalized level. I think most people experience racism. I grew up in a very serious white supremacist sort of stronghold, in a way, in the area of Pennsylvania that I grew up in. And, you know, we tend to think that racism is just with those extremist, you know, the extremist kind of crowd. And in fact, racism, you know, as a system is here in our country. And as white people, we experience it in normalized ways all the time, no matter where we are. And I wanted to explore that. And that's what the book's really about. Anyway, I'm going to read you this little piece. I've never read it to anyone this way before, but this is called The Shoveler, Tunnels on the Surface of the Moon. So Mike, he's just come back from Mike's house. Control the brain and the rest is easy. I think about this as I walk home from Mike's. He probably wasn't talking to me directly. He probably doesn't know anything about my brain. Mom doesn't even know about my brain. How would I tell her? When would I tell her? Is there a certain time of day that she can actually stop thinking about herself? My brain is none of her business, even if it's trying to drive me crazy. Every hour since that 5:33 a.m. phone call, my brain has a new distraction. Stevenson, Richardson, Davidson, Hutchinson, Robinson, Johnson, Jefferson. Every day since I could wonder, it wonders where half of me is. Ever since I could tally myself, I am half here. I just want to show you, like the text gets kind of skinnier, so I'm going to read a little faster. Family tree project, 2nd grade. I'd have preferred to dissect my own foot while it was still attached to my ankle. Florida, the teacher drew a tree on the whiteboard, drew lines around it, filled in the lines. Her mother, her father, her sister, her 2 brothers, her husband, her children, her nieces and nephews, her pets, just for fun, she said. I drew my tree big on the paper. And she said, sweetheart, you haven't left space for your family. I had one of those fat crayons in my hand. I wrote mom across the top of the tree. I wrote me in the middle of the trunk of the tree. Mrs. 2nd grade stood for a minute and I heard it. I heard it click in her head and I heard her heart break for poor little me. Never had a chance, no limbs, no leaves, no twigs, no pets, just for fun. I got an A. This kid in my class did his tree on a piece of paper so big he had to unroll it. Went back 4 generations, 4 generations. The handwriting wasn't even his. He called me out for getting an A. He said he should be the only one with an A. Mrs. 2nd grade said, your grades are not based on your family size. Recess, same day. Kid calls me a bastard and says my mom is a slut. I tell him he should eat a giant dick. He tries to punch me, but Florida kids are slower than me. I punch him instead. He bleeds. Find myself in the office, tell the principal the kid called my mom a slut, get sent home anyway, walk in on mom and her boyfriend doing things I don't want to hear. I never brought my family tree home, shoved it into the classroom trash can, spat on it for good measure. My brain makes tunnels. The tunnels get smaller. They eventually close, usually. The family tree tunnel never closes all the way. Stevenson, Richardson, Davidson, Hutchinson, Robinson, Johnson, Jefferson. I am somebody's son. I'm gonna leave it at that.
Thank you, Amy. That was a good choice. Well, thanks everybody for your readings and that little bit of context to help us in the audience as well. I really appreciated each of these books for very different reasons, but I thought I'd actually start with a question around the title of this event, which is, I didn't do what you told me. So I wanted to ask you what aspects of your writing and or your life have moved beyond what people told you to do or to be. And I'm gonna just maybe call on people if you want to pass, feel free to pass. But maybe Amy, do you want to start with this one?
Yeah, I would. It was funny. I was just reading something today. It's kind of to prepare myself for this in a way, although I didn't know what the questions would be. And I found this one piece that's true, because I write surrealist fiction. People kind of often ask me, like, what where do you have to go in your head to write such strange things? You know, what's your deal? What is reality to you? Kind of, you weirdo lady, and that kind of thing. They never call me weirdo lady to my face, but I know what they say behind my back, Tanya. Anyway, and so I wrote this thing down for an answer in an interview once, and it made sense. And it was the fact that since I was a very young child in the early 70s, and I rejected, and this is props to my parents as well, I rejected all the things I was supposed to be. I didn't wear dresses and patent leather shoes, and I didn't have pigtails, and I didn't have short, long hair and bows and all this. I wore corduroys and played with trucks. I grew up in the middle of a cornfield, and I played with bugs. And so since the age of 5, I've kind of rejected everything everybody thought I should be. And then I kind of made up my own little world. And I think I've lived in that little world for 50 years, and it's been quite nice going through. And it's, it's my privilege to do so. I mean, I do hop out and do other things in the real world. But for me, I think I didn't do anything anyone told me, simply because I didn't think the people in that world were real. And so that also meant that the one thing I do regret is not doing well in school. But at the same time, here I am, and I go to schools now to teach. So it's kind of ironic. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, it was G.I. Joes in the mud for me. No dresses or pigtails over here either. Can I ask you, Sybil, to jump in if you like?
I would like to say that I have nothing against the railroad, and I'm very well behaved, actually. I'm an exemplary. I'm in favor of civil order, is what I've gotten into in my elderly, now that I'm old. Because when I was a youth, I was a bit of a punk rocker, and then a squatter for a bunch of years. So I just move into an abandoned building and be like, this is my castle. What are you talking about? I own this by the right of occupation. Yeah, that's it. But these days, no, I'm towing the line. So I have no adversarial relationship at all to the railroad company. So that time that I got kicked off their property, and then they gave me a fine, and I plea bargained it. But then they upped it again with court fees, is balderdash. Also, I can proudly say that I'm not a completely self-taught artist. I've been kind of flunked out of 3 or 4 different art schools. Well, mostly just Concordia. Although I flunked out of the animation program, the graphic design program, and fine arts. So that's where I get my my unique perspective from. Oh, what else shouldn't I do? What else shouldn't I do? Oh, I had all these ideas for things I could talk about how to be good at rebelliousness, and also, still have the winsome charm to sell some books to the yeah, I guess now that I'm older, I can't do as many bad things. I'm glad that I was alive in the 90s when everything did not have an RFID tag and a camera on it.
Fair enough. Fair enough. You'll have more opportunities to tell us all about your rebelliousness. Don't worry.
Oh yeah, I have I just saw something smart. I'm now a self-employed business lady with my own super web store and all that. I just, I'm my own boss. I'm my own boss, and I own this tiny room I'm in and stuff.
Hey, there's a lesson in that for our audience, for sure.
Yep, you just gotta slog through. Everybody out there who's younger than 46, you just gotta slog through it for decades. Decades and decades of not getting appreciated, then finally one day it tips.
You have it. You heard it here, folks. You heard it here. David, can I ask you the same question?
Oh, how do I follow that?
I don't know. Do you want to try?
No, I think that, there's a few things. I mean, when I was growing up, the stories that were being told were ones that widely misrepresented Indigenous people. And the books that I needed to read weren't available to me. They weren't being written widely. And I think that the work that I have chosen to do in the books that I've written have tried to undo the damage that did to me and to a lot of Indigenous kids and non-Indigenous kids, and how we self-perceive and how we perceive others. And I think that, I think as a writer, just in general, a lot of topics that I've chosen to write about have been initially topics that there have been resistance to. And I think it's actually really pertinent to talk about something like When We Were Alone. When We Were Alone was my first picture book, and it was about the residential school system. And it was a picture book that was going to teach nursery, kindergarten, grade 1 kids about residential school history. And initially, my publisher, even though I work with a great publisher at Winnipeg called Highwater Press, was saying that you can't write about this topic for young kids. You just can't do it. There's too much. It's too heavy. There's too much serious stuff in there, and so there was a lot of resistance to writing that story. And I think it's pertinent because a lot of stuff was coming out today on social media, how the Alberta government is trying to eliminate the teaching of residential school history for younger learners, among other things. And that's going to be a devastating decision if they put it through, because what we're doing is cutting off kids from a source of knowledge that they need to have in Canada today. And so, the books that are being written now, including the books that I've written that address serious topics for younger learners, are vitally important, because I think our role as authors, one of our roles as authors, is to educate kids, to prepare them so that they have the knowledge to be better leaders than we have today, to make better decisions than our leaders are making for us as Canadians and in this world. We're in a pretty crappy situation right now in a lot of respects. And so, and even, my book, The Helmety Osborne Story, there was resistance, like, you can't write that as a comic, and so I've tried to defy those resistances in my career and to do things that probably I've been told that you cannot do. I think just also generally, working in a bunch of different forms of literature, not being stagnant in the choices that I've made as a writer. For one, I've tried to challenge myself to get better as a writer by writing graphic novels, YA, middle grade, memoir, whatever it might be. And that's been part of it, but also I've wanted to reach a wider audience because I feel like I have a message for my work that I hope a lot of readers can digest and learn from. And so I think all that kind of goes into that topic, and the choices that I've made as a writer and why I've made them.
Yeah, well, that was going to be one of my other questions in terms of going sort of outside of one form or going outside of maybe a more traditional form. All of your books do that to some extent. And so can I ask you a little bit about form and how you come to choose the format of the book that you're going to write, or choose the style? And maybe if for the people in the audience who don't necessarily know what that sort of more innovative form is that you used, if you could share a little bit about that as well.
One thing I do is I look at what's out there right now, especially, in the education world, what books, because books are an incredible resource for teachers and librarians, support learning in the schools. And so I look at what's available out there, what is being written about, what needs to be written about, in the context of Indigenous education, for me and for my focus. And then I make decisions based on what needs to be taught, what kind of book I'm going to write. And that requires me to learn how to write in different forms. Like when I started to write middle grade, I'd never written middle grade before. And there are aspects to writing middle grade that are particular to that genre, that form of literature, that you need to first, I think, read a lot to learn how to do it. And then in practice, just learn by doing. And the same is true for YA, the same is true for graphic novel, the same is true for picture books, for memoir. And it's all, for me, what you're doing when you write in all these different forms is you're building different skills as a writer. You're exercising different muscles as a writer that you hadn't maybe exercised before as much or in a different way. So to me, it all contributes to becoming better at the craft of writing. But yeah, it's a very particular choice based on the topic and the audience. And so it changes from book to book. In the next couple of years, I have, a picture book coming out, middle grade coming out, graphic novels coming out, memoir, all these different, in a war book. So all these different things. but it's because of the choices that I made, and and what I feel needs to be out there for, you know, certain audiences and their ages and the demographics. So.
Yeah, thank you. Sybil, you write mostly in comic book or graphic form, is that right?
I guess so. Also, I'm an artist first, and like Time Bomb happened because I wanted to illustrate a book, and even Girlfly happened because I wanted to illustrate a book.
Yeah, so do you want to, can you talk a little bit about that?
Occurred in the past couple of years. I guess I'm pretty good at writing stories.
Yeah, you are.
I
Yeah,
think
and
of
so
everything, like David was talking about. David is like a graphic novelist. I think about that a lot, where you know, a lot of people when you're writing, especially these days, you think of how you're writing, you try and think of it like a Netflix show or even a movie. So it like plays out, you see your characters like running over the tops of buildings and doing jumps while there's music in the background and stuff. And that's in your head as you write it out and you try and capture that. And then I found that really, like, I don't know, little Girlfly has like been like cooking in the Instapot for like 6 years, I guess. Because I originally just wrote it down waking up from a dream in 2014, and then I just kept tinkering with it and adding it and trying to explain it better. So I fleshed out a comic book until it turned into a kid's book. And if I kept going, it could probably turn into a novel if I wanted, but I got some other ideas. So it's interesting to like, yeah, you know, it's once again, it's like making a movie. You storyboard it out first. You storyboard it out and then present it to the movie people, I guess. And then like the storyboard gets turned into a movie somehow because people have to act out your comic book. But now I'm doing that as writing. That's my process.
Awesome. Thank you for the peek into your process. Amy, do you have any, you know, this book, Dig is complex, I would say, complicated, lots of characters. And just the excerpt that you read was a pretty good example of sort of more of a non-traditional form within the text. Do you want to just talk a little bit about how you come to these different bits and pieces?
Yeah, I'm a certified pantser. I never know what the book is going to be about until it's completely over. I don't even know when the ending is coming until it shows itself. So it's sort of strange. I've written 26 novels this way over the last 26 years, and so they don't all work. But I never think they do. Actually, when I send them in, I think, God, this is garbage. I say, this is gibberish. I don't really know. And then after a while, it polishes back up. But I started out in art school too, and it was funny because I'd flunked out everything else, Sybil, and then I ended up in art school. Art school is actually what saved my butt. Like after that, I got kicked off of campuses and whatnot, not because I did anything wrong, but because people are weird and they didn't like, I don't know, we're not gonna get into it anyway. But how I get to form, I don't know. It shows up. It shows up, and I write a sentence, and I'm like, that's weird. I wonder what that's about. If I write the next sentence, let's see what happens after that. And then it just kind of keeps going. With Dig, I'd written the shoveler parts first, and I got about, and with the shoveler came this character called the Freak. Okay, so the two of them kind of stuck together in the beginning. She was introduced in his parts. I'd already had two other parts, these two brothers, and then the grandparents that I told you about. And then the shoveler bored me. He would not tell me what was going on. Okay, so you don't know who your dad is. All right, fine, get on with it, right? And he wouldn't tell me, and he wouldn't tell me, and he wouldn't tell me. So I tossed him. I was like, up yours. I'm going to write something else. So I tossed him, and I started a new book, and it was about this girl named Can I Help You? And she works at the Arby's drive-thru, and she sells weed through the Arby's drive-thru. I did work at the Arby's drive-thru. I did not sell weed through the Arby's drive-thru.
I didn't do the crimes my characters do either.
Some of them, anyway.
Yeah.
Sure, Sybil.
Nope.
Yeah, we believe you. Anyway, so and so everything's going great. And so I Can I Help You's there, and she goes to the park with her friend Ian, and everything's going cool. And then suddenly they look over, and there's a kid with a shovel, and he's shoveling, but there is no snow. And like, that is an A.S. King book. Okay, so I went back and I grabbed the shoveler back out, stuck him back in order where he was supposed to go, and then the rest of the book came from there. So honestly, it's kismet with me. It's complete kismet. I mean, that took 3 years, and I cry and I you know, I swear, and I write other stuff in between, right? So like David was saying, you know, like, I mean, I've been writing a graphic memoir for years. I've been writing, you know, little graphic novels, kind of little, I guess I call them graphic novellas, which will end up hopefully one day getting published. I don't know, we'll see. But it's kind of, for me, being stuck in that YA machine almost was too much for me. And I didn't expect that. My first 7 novels were adult novels, or so I thought. But you know, it's just it's a funny mess how it happens, but it just happens by chance for me, Tanya. I mean, I work at it afterwards, but you know.
Right. Thank you for saying that. With all the students in the audience. Yeah, I think it's worth it to hear that it's such a messy process and not always one that you plan out or you think through. You mentioned the term pantser, which some people might not be familiar with.
I'll tell them. I'll explain.
Yeah, please
like
do.
Half of this. Okay, so here's the deal, and I say this to everybody from age like from 7 to, I don't know, 107. But first of all, revision's everything. You're never going to write something perfectly on the first go. At least I don't want to say never, but you know what I mean. It's rare. But a pantser is someone who doesn't plot out ahead of time. So like Sybil was talking about, say, storyboarding and stuff like that, which is really good if you're going to pitch a television show or write a movie, right? Or do a lot of other things, especially visual stuff. Comic books, I think, has a lot of storyboarding, right, Sybil? Am I right? Do you storyboard in your head?
Definitely. And like, actually, my comics are just kind of stream of consciousness as they go.
Okay.
I know the characters, so I let the characters plot the comic out. So.
Right on. All right. So anyway, so a plotter is somebody who like truly is plotting. Like they know exactly what they're going to write that day. Chapter 5 is going to be this scene about this. A pantser is someone who I arrive in the morning. I have no idea what's going to come out of me. I don't know where my character is going to go. There's no preferred method. And from what I can tell, it's about a 50-50 split in the novelist world from what I can tell in the panels I've been on and the people who talk about this stuff. And I wonder, is it half and half with each author too? Like I tend to plot my middle grade books more, just so that, I don't know, just because it's shorter. I don't know why, but I just do. It helps me. But when I'm working in YA, I go freestyle.
Yeah, I think like for literary fiction, I'm more of a pantser, where you just have good characters that you can follow around and see what they do. I think for like more plot heavy, like a mystery or something like that, like I would be more of a plotter. So yeah, it just changes from book to book.
Yeah, really, it's all character driven. I know where they're supposed to wind up. Like they're supposed to go through an arc where they fight the robots from Mars, and then like at the last minute they just run the heck out of there in a giant running robot, and that happens. But in the meantime, they're gonna like, you know, go play guitar on the couch and stuff, and like eat garbage, and like look out the window and be like, "Oh, Wasteland sure sucks today." Lament about stuff, and then like I know the characters. So like I just know the characters more, and then like I let the characters decide how they're getting from point A to point B. And sometimes it takes like an extra 10 pages or something.
Yeah, can I ask Sybil how you get to know your characters so well? What's your process for getting to know them?
Gosh, there is no process. I'm just the splendid fairy Wren. She likes space books and eats only pancakes. I'm like,
it just comes to you naturally.
Penelope Persephone. She's a manic bipolar in the apocalypse and smokes her own hair rolled up in a cigarette. Oh, and she has nothing in her room but cans. And yeah, I just knew this already.
Wow.
That's like a matter. I don't know. I just have the characters matter of fact in my brain, and then like I think of plots they can do and be like, yeah, what if that character was in a robot war?
Yeah, that's amazing. I love that. We do have a couple of questions coming in, and I actually just want to take the opportunity to remind the audience, we welcome your questions. Often I find the audience questions are way better than mine could ever be. So please do pop them in the chat on YouTube, and they'll get passed on to me. But we have one question, which I'll turn to now, from somebody in the audience who asks, if you have any tips on how to write a very personal experience in a way that is relatable to people who don't have that experience. And maybe, I don't know, if David, you want to start out?
I think I don't really ever write books that I don't really write to trend, or I don't really write for to try and, see how many people will read my book for what they like. I feel like when I'm writing, I write from a place of a passion I have for the topic that I'm writing about, or curiosity for, the world that I'm living in and that I want to understand better. And so it is comes from a very personal place. But I think if you're writing from honesty and from passion and from that place of truth, I feel like that's where you're going to connect with people. You're going to connect with people who are equally curious or equally passionate, or who want to, digest these stories that have these truths in them. And that's what I try to do, like just be emotionally honest with my writing, and try to engage with people in that way. And I feel like it's worked so far. I mean, and I think that one of the things that books can do is not only make connections between the author and the reader, but also within a reading community. And I think that's also like a really powerful thing about books, is that they can really bring people together. And so I just think that I would just write from a place of, truth and honesty and love and just and learn, write a lot, read a lot, and try to find your own voice and develop your own craft. That's how I approach my work anyway.
Sorry, what about you, Amy?
So the question specifically was to get people to help people understand something they might not have experienced themselves, right?
Yeah, how do you convey that in your writing?
That's a great question. I don't know. But I do know that David has the right idea with the honesty. I mean, you've got to be straight up honest. Like, you can't, like, writing a story isn't about telling a story. It's not the same. It's not like once upon a time there was a little boy named Johnny. I mean, that's cool. And that could actually turn into in fact, that was just in my voice, even though I use the exact same words as anyone else here could. The next sentence is going to be, stylistically, it's going to be me, right? But when it comes to an experience, I mean, I don't know. I talk about a lot of, I write about trauma almost all the time because I've worked with trauma survivors my whole life, and I am one as well. So I write, I think most of us are, aren't we? We're all trauma survivors, I think, in a weird way. So my traumas that I've experienced may not be the same as David's or Sybil's or yours, Tanya, but when I express when I try and feel what it feels like and feel all those different things, like shock, there's one for you. Shock is pretty much universal, right? Shock's universal. It really doesn't matter. And all the different times I've gone through trauma, the shock's always been the same. How interesting. Different traumas, same shock. So you have these things that are similar. So I think that if you look at the similarities, the things that we have in common, and things that traumas or things that experiences have in common, that might be a good way to be able to convey it to another person. And then use your own words. Use, like, I don't know, like my daughter had depression, severe bipolar depression, and she would try and explain it to me, and I would kind of understand it, but clearly I didn't understand it quite as much as I could have. I don't know it. I don't know what it's like to have severe bipolar depression. I don't know what that's like. But I know that if somebody wrote down what that's like with that same authenticity, right, that honesty, I think I'd be able to pick it up. I think I have too. I've been able to see it that way,
Yeah, thank you for that. Did you have anything to add, Sybil?
It's a very simple formula, and this is the whole thing too. I know it's a writer's best trope to say, like, show don't tell, and that's how I deal with all the things. And that's why I'm forcing you to deal with this crazy girl with her whimsical charms, and then she flicks in and out of Brack's life as it suits her, and it's just like a little messy in a lot of ways. And then she shows up and she's like, I'm throwing your plants on the floor, but I'm really sorry, I'll do your dishes and stuff, and I don't know how the ground works. Yeah, it's just I just show you and don't tell you, which is why I think anyone who doesn't get my books doesn't get the whole look it, show it, don't tell it thing. And then you have to work it out for yourself. And see, these people acting these ways are incongruous and hard to understand. So I'm forcing you to get stuck with difficult people is my whole thing. It's really a smart thing that I do. where I let my difficult characters be difficult in front of you, and then you have to interact with them that way.
I like that.
I'm talking to you.
Yeah, I love that.
I like that. Don't go to Goodreads, Sybil.
Don't go to Goodreads.
Dude, I can tell you the date I quit.
I know. And like
April 10th, 2010, I stopped going to Goodreads. I think it's a great tool for keeping track of your reading, but it's not a great tool for me, man.
I heard the
10 years
comments
off.
went off the rails in 2015, really. And that's when I turned from
it's hard not to at first,
and
but
like, what is this garbage? I'm going to fight you if I ever read you in public.
Yeah.
Anyway,
it's not healthy.
I need to break the habit of Goodreads. I like obsessively go there. So like from time to time,
Oh,
I
no.
find spurts where I go there and I read what people say about my books, and I just like, I'm going to quit writing.
Oh, David, don't do that.
Someone said I was as bad and as horrible as Francesca Leah Block. And you don't diss. You don't diss. I was a teenage fairy. That's a jerk move.
Don't. No, and it's so funny, isn't it? How it's like I was off the grid for 10 or more than 10 years, and so I don't know, is it just a self-control thing? But I can even go to certain sites and just pull the copy off that I want to copy from my book and still not even look at the star ratings. I just don't. I can't, because I'm too sensitive. I'm a human being who's a sensitive soul, I guess. I don't know. I'm tough as nails.
It's not a nice place. It's not a nice place to go. Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. Tough nails can be sensitive.
Exactly.
That's true. That is very true. Yeah. I a couple more questions coming in. I want to get them because I love the idea of these young people asking for more from you. Right. This question is specifically for you, Sybil, from Kevin Kitamura. You are an artist. When did you realize your passion for writing?
Ooh, I've always been a really great storyteller. I used to, when I was 6, I would make my mom, dad, and sister sit through, when I was 6, my sister was 2. So I make everybody sit through plays and make all my stuffed animals would come out and they'd do a play and they're like, we're doing the Railroad Children today. And then like the Railroad Children had to find their own boxcar, and then they all moved into the boxcar together, and then they got a tea set for their boxcars. They could play house in it. It was way better than their parents' house. And then, geez, when did that turn into a thing? You know what it was? Blogging. It was the live journal. So live journal, I was like, suddenly I had like my tiny audience. I could show like in the end of the 90s there, by the end of the 90s, I was doing like comic book zines all the time. And then I'd have like a distribution of like 25 copies or maybe like 30. And I'd hand deliver them to my friends. I'd bike around and be like the news girl, paper girl, and like just like sneak. I'd even go to people's houses while they were there and obviously sneak my zines into their mailbox and stuff. And at that point, those were all like the early proto Lost Little Girl comics. And mostly just like adventures of me, and then my name was Little Chicken. I was like having sad comics and stuff. I still have them somewhere in a drawer. I'm not taking them out. But yeah, and then I got into a couple of times I'd write something in live journal, but not really. But yeah, really, it started off as comics, and then for me, Time Bomb was my real writing thing, because Time Bomb, I guess like throughout the mid 2000s, I was like, I'd write stories about what I did all the time with my like punk rock friends and like Squatland and living in the post-Hurricane Katrina and wandering around the Bay Area and New York City and stuff. So I'd write little stories about all my adventures on live journal and draw pictures and put photos. And then it just got embellished until it wound up being a book. But no, like, where'd the book go? The Girl Who's Convinced Beyond All Reason She Can Fly is a big relief to me, because I started writing an illustrated kids book when I was like 17 years old. And it was going to be called Twilight Jam. And it was about a little girl who like just is always up late, so she doesn't notice when time stops and gets lodged right at dusk. And the whole world is abandoned except there's like punk rock angels and some evil businessmen in a blimp, and she has to solve why the time stopped for the world. It was pretty sophisticated for 17 years old. But that never happened. But now I have this book.
There's always time. There's a few questions coming in about advice for young writers, which makes sense. Does anybody, we're coming closer to the end of our time together, so can we squeeze in some writing advice?
Yeah, I'll just toss this out there. This is part of what I think what David, well, we're all saying, I think, is to be more genuine, you really have to know yourself. So please journal, just journal, just start. I had a bad attitude in school. So my poetry teacher told me to journal. I was like, this is stupid. And yet next to me right here, I just pulled them out of the attic. I have a stack that's probably about this high of journals that I'm so happy. And I didn't even journal for like 20 years. So like most of the time I was in Ireland, most of the time I was in Jamaica. I didn't journal at all. But having those journals was a big deal, and being able to sort of work with my emotions and understand myself and understand how I worked helped me create, because I create humans for a living. That's what I do. Like I make little paper humans and then I do horrible things to them so that you cry. And so to know how you operate is a good thing. So that read a lot, write a lot. But for me, journaling was one of the biggest things, just because it made me more in touch with me, which is weird and sounds kind of really me centered, but it's not. It helps me make other people now, you know?
Yeah, that's great advice.
That's the great advice. I don't really, I mean, I had a professor in university who I used to show my work to, Neil Besner. And he used to sit me down in his office and he'd look at me dead in the eye and he'd say, you know, do you want to be a better writer, Dave? And I would say, yes. And he'd say, then you have to read. And so I know that, you know, Amy had just said that, and I think that probably is one of the better advice I'd ever received, was that you need to read, and you need to read a lot, and you need to read widely, and it helps you to. And I look at like as an observational thing. Like if you're a hockey player, you want to watch the best hockey players, and so even as a writer now, I read really good literature because it helps me to understand how to write better myself. And you find yourself adapting and taking and being inspired by different writers, their approaches to story and a character development, dialogue, all these different things. And I read a lot now. I didn't used to read that often in the 90s, but I think it's really helped me as a writer. And the flip side of it is to write a lot, and to write all the time, and to challenge yourself to try new things. And I think those are two things that I do a lot. And I think the other thing is just to observe the world around you. I think as a writer, you're observing, and you always need to see, to listen, to hear, to watch people, watch how they act and how they talk. And I think that those are probably three things that I would give for advice to younger writers, all writers.
I'm jumping in and just right in front of Sybil, I'm just saying, hey, one of the coolest things I ever did to help me as a writer was volunteering and helping like in my community. So whether I was teaching people how to read, whether I was working with trauma victims of assault, no matter what I was doing, it helped me. I got stories. I hate to say it, I didn't steal these people's stories technically, but like it gave me so much information that I hadn't experienced. So that was super important. So getting out and like living, like, again, I mean, I've lived around the world, so it's been kind of cool. So traveling and living in places that aren't familiar to you. I wanted to say that because I know Sybil has lived kind of all kinds of interesting lives. So I'll shut up now.
Also, another good thing to do is like when you're, for me, you said the inspirations for writing and stuff. I think a lot like my writing, I started with writing about myself and my friends and all the cool people I met traveling around, because that's what I was doing in the beginning of the 2000s. I was trying to meet all my internet friends. I was just going and wandering around North America. And then, like I said, like write about stuff like that, but you make it cooler. Like in I've Got a Time Bomb, you get evil Sybil. And the delineation is that the difference between me and her is that she sucks at art. She even has artistic pretenses where she tries to do like really bad art, like do a perfect copy of the Pogo Boy, who's holding the cartoon Pogo Boy, or take Polaroids stuck to things with clothespins. So she just sucks at art. So she has to do all the, she has nothing to redeem her. So you can, that's also just a fun one. You're allowed to make yourself like better and worse. Like Sybil's really freaking strong, super hot, has tons of girlfriends and boyfriends, is a master criminal.
Love it. That's awesome advice, everybody. Thank you. I'm just getting the cue that classes are coming to a close and working to our end. Yeah. That's the sound of thousands of children cheering. So I'll pass it on to Leslie. Thank you so much for that wonderful discussion.
Thank you all
Thank
so
you.
much. I loved the candid nature of that conversation. It was great, really entertaining, and I thank you all for joining us. Thanks, Tanya, for hosting this. And hey, kids, school's out. Time to go home. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Woo!
Thanks, everyone.
All right, it's us.
It's really nice to meet you all.